Okay, so in this video we're going to wrap up the stadium, and then we can move on to getting our benches in place. So for the stadium, there's only a few things that we need to do. First of all, we need to cap off our two ends of the stadium. Steve, let's go ahead and bring up our parameters, add a few rows, and show them what I'm talking about when I say we need to cap this off. Yeah, that's perfect. Okay, so if you look at this, at our starting end right there, we have an opening. So you're able to look into here, and of course that's hollow all the way around, and then it comes out over here. We need to cap this off so that our ends are solid. Let's see, what else we need to do? It would be great to get rid of the smooth shading because it looks kind of funky at the moment. Yeah, go ahead and rotate around. Yeah, it almost doesn't look like we have any solid, hard rows right here unless you look out here. Then you can see it right there. So we'll use an edge cusp. We'll get rid of all of the smooth shading. Next, it would be nice if the artist had the ability to control the overall height and the overall depth of the entire thing. This is very simple. We've created everything based off of a unit when we started with our curve to begin with. So if we create an overall height and an overall depth float parameter, and then we use that information to simply scale our entire thing by Y to control the height, and by both X and Z to control the depth.
Exactly, so we would have control over the height of each row and also the depth of each row.
Yeah, otherwise we're locked into this shape right here.
Exactly.
Well, with the ability to control both of our rows and columns, but that would be about it. So we'll set that up. Let's see what else we want to do. I think that's just about it with the exception of some shaders. We'll put a shader together, throw the shader on, and you know what? Since we're going to be wrapping up the stadium, how about we go ahead and add the floor object parameter as well so that we can go ahead and specify a floor for our stadium to sit on.
Sounds good.
Sound pretty good to you? So let's go ahead and jump over real quick to our whiteboard. And over here on the whiteboard, let's talk about how we are going to cap off our sides. Now, depending on the number of rows, that will determine what kind of cap we need to use. And the information is already available coming out of our switch right there. What are we switching between at the moment? Well, we're switching between a shape that looks like this. In this case, we'd have 3 rows. Or a shape that looked like this, where we were using the grid, if we had only 1 row. So these two guys, as Steve has already demonstrated, are filled in, so they're just like plates, if you will. And they're already positioned in the right spot for the first side. So if we did a top view, so this was the shape that ended up getting revolved around. Because of inner radius, it's already been moved off right here. And then that gives us the overall stadium shell. Well, if we take this plate right here and transform it, rotate it 180 degrees around Y, wouldn't we have the plate over here on this side flipped? The answer, yes. So we'll go ahead and use a transform node to get that guy moved around. And then the edge cusp will simply be applied afterwards. Everybody gets merged together and it looks beautiful. Then the next thing we're going to do is add to our asset an overall height. And overall depth. And as we said with the overall height, we'll simply use a transform node and we will take this value and we will simply scale in Y. And that'll control the height of this guy. So this whole guy, meaning this guy right here, can be scaled up or down. And then overall depth will simply scale with X and with Z. So the expressions will be the same. And then we'll have the overall depth control. So we'll get that into place and then use the same technique we used in the last asset for grabbing the transform node that had the expression on it for our floor object specifications. And then a quick shader. What do you have planned for a shader? Just
very basic Vex super material.
Okay, that's what
just
I was
a single material since we've only got that one piece of geometry.
Sounds fantastic. All right, Steve, well, let me go ahead and turn it over to you.
Cool.
And let's start out by getting this guy capped off.
Yeah, so I'm going to jump over into Houdini, and let's close out our parameters. So we've got our revolve, and as we saw on the whiteboard, if we bring our visibility up to our switch, we have the end panel for capping off this end.
We have our plate.
Yeah, we can call it a plate. So I'm going to wire a merge after our revolve. We can wire our switch in, and then we can deal with rotating through 180 to create the other end plate.
Yeah, sounds good.
So I'm going to right-click on the output of the revolve and create a merge. enter and enter to place that in. And I'm going to rename this to merge stadium. Wow, where'd that S come from? Stadium, fantastic.
Stadius.
Yeah, that sounds pretty cool. So I'm going to left click on the output of the switch and wire that into our merge as well. So now we've got this
One side
end.
capped off.
I'm going to middle click on the output of the switch to branch into a transform SOP. So transform, enter, and enter. And with this transform SOP, if I go ahead and wire him in and switch over into wireframe, if we rotate around Y, you can see that we come out.
Very cool.
Or, I guess more accurately, if we were to rotate through a positive angle, it's almost as if we're doing that revolve, and we know we set our revolve to 180 degrees. Look at that. 180 degrees.
Very nice.
Which is going to line us up perfectly for this end as well. I'm going to turn off point numbers and points just to make things a little bit clearer. So I'm going to rename this to end cap underscore xform. I do want to go ahead and add an edge cusp onto our revolve to clean up our revolve. So I'm going to right click on the output of the revolve and type edge cusp, enter and enter to create that, and that's going to give us
Look at that.
nice clean shading.
Alright, so let's go ahead and get our overall height and depth parameters set up on the asset.
So I'm going to right click on our asset and come down to type properties. That is off the bottom of the capture region. Let's just resize this guy so we can see what we're dealing with. I'm going to come over to the parameters tab and create two new float parameters, our overall height and our overall depth. So I'm going to drag out two new floats, rename this guy to overall height and just give him a label of height, and rename this guy to overall depth and give him a label of depth. I am going to lock both of these guys with a minimum of 0.001.
Again, having a value of 0 in there, since we're going to be multiplying this in just a minute, would not make a lot of sense.
Yeah, exactly. Even though 0.001 is very small,
close
it's
to 0.
not quite 0, so it just
Maybe
stops
you're working
everything
with a
from
mini
completely
C.
collapsing. Yeah, it'd be very tiny.
It's a
Wow.
stadium for a flea circus.
I think it's even smaller than that. We'd have to, for like, I don't know, atoms or something.
Alright.
So overall height, overall depth, we can accept that. And now we can wire our merge into a transform. So I'm going to right click on the output of the merge. I'm going to grab a transform from our history, single left click to select, enter to place that in. I'm going to rename this guy to overall depth height underscore xform. And we're simply going to scale in Y based on our overall height parameter and scale in X and Z based on overall depth. So scale Y will be our overall height parameter, which should make everything look like it's collapsed. If we right click and bring up our parameters, let's just extend this. As we start bringing up our height, we now have a height control.
Excellent.
Scale in X was set to overall depth. And scale in Z to overall depth. And if we right click, bring up our parameters and start increasing depth, we now also have a depth control. So between our height, our depth and our inner radius, we have complete control over the size and shape of our stadium.
Outstanding.
Great, so really all that's left to do is the floor object and the shader. So we'll deal with the floor object first. I'm going to create the parameter on our asset to store our floor object, and then I'm going to grab a transform SOP from one of the other assets. So I'm going to right click and come down to type properties. I'm going to create an operator path. Let's go ahead and create a separator as well, so that we have a separator before, just following what we've been doing with our other assets. I'm going to name this guy, again, like with everybody else, floor obj with a capital O, floor object, and set him to be any object, but just geometry. So we got geometry only, and accept that out. So I'm going to jump up a level, and up another level until we're at the object level. And I'm going to jump inside our stage by double clicking, jump inside our stage asset by double clicking, finding our sit on floor object transform. I'm going to control C to copy him. If I come up here and left click on the drop down for our history, I can go back into our bleachers asset. And I'm going to control V to paste this guy and wire our transform into him. Now if I right click and bring up our parameters for our asset and grab our stage as our floor object again, making sure that we're doing an absolute path, we can see that we jump up to sit on our stage. which that's not the floor object we actually want for this guy, but it does prove the point that
It
it's
does
working.
show it works.
Because since our actual floor's at 0, we wouldn't have seen any change if I'd have grabbed him
That's
from the
right.
parameters. So I just wanted to make sure it looked like it was working. And now actually go and set him back down to the floor.
Okay.
Sweet. He's very tiny right now, but we'll sort that out in a later video.
Okay.
So I'm going to hide out all the other objects.
Okay. Let's
Fantastic.
go ahead and get a
let's get a
shader on
shader
it.
applied. So I'm going to push tab, create a shop network, enter, enter, and I'm going to rename this to bleachers shop. Push enter to jump inside. I'm going to create a vex super material. Enter and enter. I'll rename this guy to m_stadium base. And I'm just simply going to set a dark sort of red diffuse colour, so really dark red, because if this was a floor of a stadium it probably wouldn't have a bright colour, because when the audience is sat there watching the show they wouldn't want to be distracted by, say, a luminous green floor beneath them, so a dark red will serve perfect here. Again, I want this to be a carpety kind of material, a bit like our original floor, so I'm going to decrease our specular colour to almost to black, maybe even lower than that, something around 0.04. Boost our diffuse rough just a little, and boost our specular rough quite a lot. I'm going to jump up a level, well, that took me up 2, so I'm going to jump back inside our asset. I'm simply going to wire our merge stadium into a material sop. So wire this into a material sop, enter and enter, and I'm going to grab our m_stadium base, making sure to export a relative path, and that's going to assign that guy to our stadium. Now it's up to you. We could promote some of these parameters up to the asset. Everyone's seen how to do that before, or we can just say that for now we're happy with this color. And
let's go ahead and promote.
Do you want to promote it up?
Yeah,
Cool.
just so it all kind of feels wrapped up.
So I'm going to right click and come down to type properties. I'm going to create a folder within our bleachers that I'm going to call shaders. And I'll grab from nodes, I'll open up our bleachers, open up our bleachers shop, open up our m_stadium base, grab our shader. Before I promote these up, I want to make sure that linked prefix, the name and label are turned off. And I'm going to grab our diffuse color, our specular color, our diffuse rough, and our specular rough, and promote those over. If I come back to by type, I'm actually going to create a folder just for these guys as well within shaders. So I'll name this folder something like Stadium Base. Shift grab these guys and drag them into the stadium base, and then if we accept and bring up the parameters, we're going to have our bleachers, because I'm going to create a folder for audience at a later date. Underneath that we've got our shaders, and inside shaders we have our stadium base with control over the shader for this guy.
Outstanding. And that's everything that we set out to accomplish in this video, so that brings this video to an end. Thanks a lot.